Welcome everyone to Discover This. Well, today we got a little bit of history for you. We're going to go back and visit a few places that involved the Civil War. And right now we're out in the Sonoran Desert of Arizona. And we're going to take you to three places that the Civil War touched here in the Arizona Territory back in the day. So let's get to it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In 1861, Confederate soldiers from Texas made their way into the New Mexico Territory and claimed it for the Confederacy. Around February 1862, about 75 Confederate troops, led by Captain Sherrod Hunter, marched to Tucson and occupied it for the Confederacy. Tucson became the westernmost outpost for the Confederacy. Confederate President Jefferson Davis intended the Army to occupy the Southern Territory from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. When they learned of the Confederate troop movement, Union commanders ordered Union troops from California to march across the desert and challenge the Confederate troops. Brigadier General James Carleton was the leader of, and I've heard two different amounts, but somewhere between 1,400 and 2,300 pro-Union troops from California. Called the California Column, it was made up of volunteer infantry and cavalry. Now the Union troops had left Fort Yuma and were slowly heading east, mostly along the Gila River. Somewhere between Fort Yuma and Stanwix Station, there was a grain mill operated by a pro-Union fellow by the name of Ammi White. Captain Hunter and his troops arrested White, and they waited for the Union troops to arrive. They eventually did, and Hunter's contingent were posing as civilians. A Captain McCleve was leading this advance party of Union troops, and McCleve inadvertently told Hunter's soldiers, disguised as civilians, all about their pre-positioned supplies and their route. McCleve was then arrested by Hunter's troops. We are here at what's left of Stanwix Station. Originally, this place was built in the 1850s by the Butterfield Overland Mail stagecoach line at a stop very close to the Gila River, which is out there a few hundred yards. It was called Flapjack Station and also for a long time Grinnell's Station, or sometimes Grinnell's Ranch. It was later called Stanwix Station and sometimes Stanwix Ranch. And you can see there's basically a foundations left here. And the forms of a wooden structure was here. A lot of bolts left over from the day, but tore up by the elements and I'm sure vandals. So the incident that happened here was in March of 1862, when a group of 272 troops from the California Column of Union soldiers, and this group was led by Captain William Calloway, they were heading east towards New Mexico. Now hay had been placed at Stanwix Station here for the animals for the California Column, and there was some other supplies. When the Union soldiers got to Stanwix Station on March 29th, 1862, they found Confederate soldiers burning the hay. Now hay had been burned at 5 other stagecoach stops, which was delaying the California Column's advance to Tucson. There was an exchange of gunfire here at Stanwix Station between the Union and Confederate soldiers, and one Union soldier was wounded. The Confederates retreated back to Tucson and warned Captain Sherrod Hunter, who was the military commander of Western Confederate Arizona. This was significant because it gave the Confederates time to prepare for the Union troops. Now this area looks basically the same as it did in 1862, pretty remote, but very close to the Gila River, and up that way about maybe a mile or two is Agua Caliente and the hot springs, which was another stop on the route. But Just a cement foundation left out here in the Sonoran Desert. But you can see the kind of terrain they had to traverse back in the day on a stagecoach or a horseback to get to where they were going, either east or west. All right, so we're now outside of Tucson, Arizona at Picacho Peak. And this was the next incident or battle, whatever word you want to use, in some of the Civil War incidents in Arizona. So we're going to check this place out and tell you the story about what happened here. So now, after the Confederate troops retreated from Stanwix Station, which we were just at, they went back to the Confederate headquarters in Tucson and warned Captain Sherrod Hunter about the advancing Union troops. Captain Hunter then ordered Sergeant Henry Holmes and 9 Confederate soldiers to Picacho Pass, which is this area right here, where you can see the freeway down there, Interstate 10. This is Picacho Pass. And it's right next to Picacho Peak. And their job was to scout for the Union soldiers, which would have been coming from the west, which is that direction there. So this place is full of informational boards. So you can hit pause and read this, or if you read fast enough, then good for you. So there's a whole Civil War memorial walking trail through the Picacho Peak State Park that you can come check out. It gives you lots of information about what happened here. But again, just more informational boards. And it's showing you here on the board and right out there, that's where it's saying it happened. So basically, Captain Calloway, if you remember him from the Stanwix incident, got word that Confederates were at Picacho Pass here. His orders were to capture Tucson and rescue Captain McLeave, if you remember the Union captain who got arrested by the Confederate troops at Stanwix Station, or nearby. The plan was to have 2 12-man cavalry squads surround the Confederates here, and then have a 3rd squad come in from the front. And on April 14th, 1862, as the Union troops started to surround the Confederates opened fire and scattered the Union troops. The Confederates retreated into the brush and reloaded. The Union troops marched into the brush, and 3 Confederates immediately surrendered and were taken prisoner. The firefight here continued for about an hour. 3 Union troops were killed and others were wounded on both sides. The California troops became exhausted and broke off the fight, which allowed the Confederates to flee back to Tucson, and that prevented a surprise attack by Union troops on Tucson. This will tell you about the howitzer here that's right next to us that I will show you again in a moment. But again, if you want to freeze this and read about it. But talking about this right here, aimed right towards the Picacho Pass. And here's kind of a general timeline of the whole Civil War. So for those of you that didn't read about this in your school history books, here's a kind of a synopsis. We've actually done a very good job with these storyboards here. They're all very well maintained, and just for information, it costs about $7 per vehicle to come in here for just a regular car. And they have a few discounts, and it costs more for motorhomes, things like that, or camping, I mean, things like that. So you can look it up. Picacho Peak State Park in Arizona. So now Tucson eventually fell to the Union troops because the Confederacy was just outmanned and no reinforcements were coming from New Mexico or Texas or anywhere else. So a few years later, troops were sent from Tucson back to Picacho Pass to recover the 3 bodies of the Union troops that died in the firefight back on April 14th, 1862. And they were only able to find 2 bodies. The body of the 3rd, Lieutenant James Barrett, was never found, and so is most likely still buried in an unmarked grave right in here somewhere. So there's a marker here for the Union troops that died here. And again, they never were able to find Lieutenant James Barrett's body out here. So he's still out here somewhere. Anyway, they've done a nice memorial to this incident that happened here. So you should come check it out. All right, so we are now out in La Paz, Arizona, or what's left of La Paz, Arizona. It's an old mining town. It's a stop on the, when the steamships went up and down the Colorado River. It was a stop for an Army supply route, a stage stop back in the day. But also the scene of an incident involving Union troops and a Confederate soldier. Now in 1861, some miners found gold in this area, and they continue to find gold. And you can see some of the old mines right there. And over there. So word spread, and in February 1862, 40 more gold seekers came to this area to mine. And they ended up naming the area La Paz. And soon adobe buildings were built, and La Paz became a port on the Colorado River for the steamships operating between Yuma and points north. Remember, back in those days, the river was closer to this point and wider. Since being dammed, the river trajectory has changed over the years, and the river is now farther away from this area that was La Paz. Now you can still see some foundations and things from the old town, but no buildings or anything like that. Now in early 1863, General James Carleton arrested several secessionists from California who were headed to Texas to support the Confederacy. He detained them at Fort Yuma, just downstream from here. One of those detainees was a fellow by the name of William Edwards, who went by the nickname Frog. In May of 1863, Frog was released from Fort Yuma, and he made his way north to the La Paz area. On May 20th, 1863, the steamship Cocopah arrived in La Paz en route to Fort Mojave. A small group of Union soldiers disembarked and headed to the general store for some supplies. Hiding in the shadows nearby was William Frog Edwards. As the soldiers approached, Frog opened fire with his revolver. One Union private was killed instantly, another private was mortally wounded and would die the next day, and one bystander was struck and seriously wounded. The lieutenant in charge of those Union soldiers searched the town, and they couldn't find Frog. The next day, the lieutenant reboarded the Cocopah and with his dead soldiers headed back to Fort Yuma. Once there, the lieutenant told what happened, and a troop of 40 men was deployed to find Frog Edwards in this area right here. They eventually found his body way out in the desert. He apparently died from exposure and dehydration. Just some more remnants of what is left of La Paz. So this incident, while not at all a battle or even a skirmish really, more of an ambush, this was the most western incident between Union and Confederate troops in Arizona. And you can see those mountains back there, straight ahead. That's California. Colorado's right between here and those mountains. So that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen, for this short history lesson on the Civil War and how it came to be in the territory of Arizona and what happened here. And we're back at Picacho Peak, Picacho Pass area. And again, if you're ever out in this southern Arizona area near Tucson, or out near Yuma with Stanwix Station, or up north of Ehrenberg and south of Parker for La Paz, come check out those sites. And there's plenty of books written about the southwestern desert and the Civil War. I'll show you a couple here that I found really well researched. So, but there's plenty of others and some documentaries you can find and things like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this this little history lesson. I certainly learned some things, and I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you taking the time, and we will see you on the next Discover This.